Welcome. This is one of 3 videos that explain why people choose team-focused questionnaires. Most people recognise that personality questionnaires oversimplify. We may want a picture of this man, but in reality, if we're lucky, we might get this. So what is it that personality questionnaires filter out? One key thing is that they build on a rather static model of personality. But is that model of personality accurate? What is this man doing? And consider Heraclitus, who said that you never step in the same river twice. This is an apt metaphor for us as people. You are not the same person you were a moment ago, even less who you were last year or the year before that. So a big question is, what has changed and by how much? And does that relate to personality? So consider this little girl. When she becomes this teenager and then a woman, and all being well this older lady, is what we call personality fixed through all of these stages? In fact, traditional psychometrics evaluates the quality of a questionnaire by the fact that it doesn't change. It's called reliability. So there is a built-in bias towards focusing on what does not change. And underlying that is an implicit, and for many actually an explicit explanation, that it is based on our DNA. However, even if this is true, and that can be debated, what we cannot debate is that questionnaires do not measure DNA. Questionnaires extract and systematize people's beliefs about themselves. We can think of them extracting a person's autobiographical narrative. And who believes that the little girl's narrative won't change? Of course it will. And of course it will be influenced by experience and maturity. Even if we believe that there is a basic physiological predisposition, questionnaires do not measure those. They are vehicles for clarifying how a person's autobiographical narrative changes. And that is something that we would be surprised if it didn't change. Once we appreciate what questionnaires really deliver, we can make them more interesting. Administering a questionnaire is like giving people a microphone. They can now tell us, or even sing to us, what their story is as they see it. An example is what we've done with the Resilience Scales questionnaire, the RSQ. We ask people how they think and react typically. But then we ask what changes under pressure. And our research told us that pressure can be both positive and negative. So we introduced asking them for their story when stretched, and then when stressed. The result is a much more useful perspective on how people experience and change under pressure. And it is often the differences that are far more informative than a simple typical rating, which is what we get from most questionnaires. But even more interesting is how people change over the longer term. And this involves a fundamental change of paradigm. Instead of seeing ourselves as products of our past, most questionnaires are essentially looking backwards, explaining who I am today as both my DNA and my past in some combination. But once we put change on the table, we can change the question. We move from what has made me who I am today to who am I in the process of becoming, so looking forwards. This is in a good tradition that predates positive psychology, and I refer you to psychologists such as Carl Jung or Viktor Frankl. But how can we help people do that? Well, earlier I mentioned the importance of untangling identity from roles, which we do by asking people about preference rather than behaviour. But what do you prefer is not easy. Would you rather have a cake or chicken? Would you rather have constipation or diarrhea? Once we've stripped out situational demands, i.e. roles, preferences can be either what feels natural or perhaps what I would prefer to be. Now, everybody experiences wanting to be a little bit more this or a little bit less that. And by asking people what they prefer, the way it is and the way they want, we find that this separates the current natural or comfort zone and an ideal vision. And there is no change without vision. So we help people to recognize that and then to become agents in their own future. What I have described are two approaches that we use to create a more fruitful paradigm for learning and development. Our approach is to introduce fresh thinking to psychometrics, which has made progress technically with technology and statistics, but has been rather poor at thinking about what we are really trying to measure, the psychology behind the psychometrics. There are other innovations we have introduced, such as how to measure people's values, another fundamentally important element which is tied up with people's identity. So if you'd like to know more, get in touch. But thank you for listening.